In the terminal stage of cancer, the only chemotherapy opportunity that could have saved my life was purchased by Victor for Ivy, who was in the early stage of cancer. I abandoned the life-saving treatment proposed by the doctor and ingested a potent pain-blocking drug, the cost of which was organ failure and death 3 days later. During these 3 days, I relinquished everything. When I handed over all my hard-earned achievements to Ivy, my parents smiled with relief. When Victor presented the divorce agreement and I signed it readily, he sighed and remarked that I was very sensible. When I encouraged Lily to call Ivy Mommy, she gleefully declared that Mommy was the best, even when I transferred the property and assets under my name to Ivy. They noticed nothing amiss, merely gazing at me with satisfaction, saying, "Our sensible Rose has finally returned." Yet, I couldn't help but wonder if they would remember me after my death. Under the doctor's compassionate gaze, I swallowed the pain-blocking drug, with 3 days remaining until my death. Afterward, I went to Ivy's ward. Inside the ward, Dad was peeling an orange for Ivy while Mom conversed with her. Upon my entrance, their smiles instantly turned cold, and they said, "What, can't keep up the act of being sick and planning to trouble Ivy again? Rose, I'm telling you, with us here, don't even think about bullying Ivy." Dad looked at me with an icy tone, saying, "The Ning family has always upheld strict upbringing. I don't know where you picked up such bad habits, jealous of Ivy and even snatching her chemotherapy chance. If I'd known, I wouldn't have given birth to you." Mom scolded, pointing at me. In a corner unseen by my parents, Ivy smiled at me, her eyes brimming with provocation. I lowered my gaze. Having heard these words from them countless times before previously, I would have argued fiercely and publicly exposed Ivy's facade, though they never believed a single word I said. But now, I was exhausted and no longer wished to fight. "But your timing is perfect. I have something to discuss with you," Dad said then. I smiled and replied, "Dad, I have something to tell you too. Ivy wants my shop business and company, right? I've decided to give them all to her." Dad was momentarily stunned, and Mom looked at me in surprise, asking, "How did you know I was going to talk to you about this today? You've agreed?" I gave a faint smile. Their surprise and repeated confirmation were understandable. Ivy had long coveted the shop and company under my name, and my parents had said everything, good and bad, to convince me to hand over my hard-earned efforts to her, but I had never relented. Now, as someone about to die, these things held no meaning for me anymore. Seeing my earnest demeanor, Mom finally smiled with relief, stepping forward to pat my head, saying, "You've finally come around. Ivy has always been more outstanding than you since school, and though she's ill now, her financial management skills surpass yours. We feel at ease in trusting your shop and company to her." I faintly smiled, handing the transfer agreement to Ivy. After my parents saw her sign it, they happily held my hand, repeatedly calling me a good child. A faint irony stirred in my heart. How laughable that only when I yielded to Ivy would Mom smile at me, yet I also wondered if, upon discovering Ivy's true nature and my death, she and Dad would feel regret. In the evening, I returned home to find my husband Victor and daughter Lily cooking in the kitchen. Perhaps due to my terminal cancer, the sound of the door closing was softer, and the father-daughter pair continued cooking and laughing as if they hadn't heard. Victor plated the food and, upon turning to see me, his smile froze for a moment before returning to normal, asking, "Rose, when did you get back? How come there was no sound?" I quietly observed the dish in Victor's hand, stir-fried mixed vegetables, Ivy's favorite. Judging by its presentation, it rivaled the skill of a professional chef. It's rather ironic that only now, as I neared death, did I learn that Victor, with whom I'd lived for 5 years, could cook. Previously, he always criticized my cooking, and under his influence, our daughter Lily gradually began to disdain me too. I had toiled tirelessly for this family, yet in the end, I earned not a shred of respect. In the past, I might have erupted into a hysterical frenzy, but now I merely walked past them calmly, sitting on the sofa to organize the contents of my bag. Seeing my silence, Victor paused, then placed the dish on the table and approached me, saying, "Rose, today, I have something to discuss with you." Victor awkwardly rubbed his nose, hesitating before speaking. "It's about your sister Ivy." My heart sank as an unsettling thought suddenly surfaced. The next moment, Victor's words left me stunned. "After Ivy's cancer chemotherapy, she's been very down, so your parents asked me to marry her to lift her spirits." A buzzing rang in my ears, and it took a long while before I regained my voice to ask, "So, you agreed?" Victor sighed, "Rose, though Ivy isn't your biological sister, she's been part of the family since your parents adopted her. It's just to bring good luck once Ivy is discharged. I'll still be your husband and Lily's father." Before I could respond, Lily chimed in, "Yeah, Mommy, Godmother's been really down lately, you should understand her." I silently regarded the father and daughter before me. This was the man I had loved for years, the child I had painstakingly raised. I asked myself and found no fault in my actions toward my family, husband, or child, yet in the end, I faced their betrayal. But now it didn't matter, since Ivy wanted it, I would give it all to her, everything I no longer desired. I looked up at Victor and said, "Fine, I agree." A flash of surprise crossed his eyes. "Really?" he asked, then swiftly retrieved the divorce agreement from a drawer and placed it on the table. I gave a faint smile. "Victor, oh Victor, you couldn't even bother to conceal your eagerness, could you?" I picked up the pen and quickly signed the document. After I signed, Victor's face was filled with relief, his expression solemn and affectionate. "Rose, once Ivy is discharged, we'll remarry, rest assured, I'll never betray you." He said this, then signed the divorce agreement as well. After signing, he looked at me and sighed, "Rose, you've become much more sensible than before. I've made mistakes in the past, and that's on me. Once Ivy recovers, I promise I won't let you worry about anything ever again." "Yeah, Mommy." Lily spoke up like a little adult, "Mommy's so good to Godmother, I'm proud of you." Watching them, my heart turned to ashes. Until this moment, I had clung to a final shred of hope for Victor and Lily. But now, so be it. Aside from death, I had no expectations left. I stood to bypass them and return to my room to rest, but a wave of intense dizziness overcame me, and I couldn't hold on, fainting as my vision darkened, catching a glimpse of Victor's anxious expression. I was jolted awake by a chill. Opening my eyes, I found myself still lying on the floor, while Victor and Lily looked at me with disappointment. "Dad, I told you Mommy's faking it again." Lily said, "Mommy, can you stop being so childish? This really delays us from visiting Godmother at the hospital." "Faking it?" Victor then spoke with evident disappointment. "Rose, can you stop fooling around? Haven't I told you that even though we're divorced, I still love you? You don't need to test me with childish tricks like pretending to faint." After hearing Victor's words, I finally understood. The pain-blocking drug I took could suppress all pain for 3 days, making me appear like a normal person with a healthy complexion during that time, but its severe side effect would cause organ failure and death after 3 days, and it seemed the drug's effect was indeed impressive. I forced myself to stand, saying, "It might be low blood sugar, no big deal, I'll go to the hospital with you. There are some transfer documents that still need Ivy's signature." Victor nodded, his face showing no surprise, suggesting my parents had likely informed him beforehand. At the hospital, Ivy was watching TV in her ward, greeting me with, "Rose, you're here." Her complexion remained pale, but her spirits had noticeably improved, though I didn't overlook the smugness and arrogance in her eyes. "Rose, thank you for trusting me to manage your businesses. You can rest assured I won't let you down," Ivy said, while Mom added with a smile, "Yes, Rose, with your shop and company handed over to Ivy, you can stay home every day, enjoying dividends. What a great deal." I took the remaining documents from my bag, saying, "In that case, let her manage all my assets too, then I won't have to worry about anything anymore." Everyone in the ward was momentarily stunned. "Rose, are you serious? You're giving all your assets to Ivy?" Victor grabbed me, his eyes filled with astonishment, and this time, I was the one puzzled. In the past, they always sided with Ivy, giving her whatever she wanted. If I refused, they reprimanded me relentlessly. So why, now that I was giving everything to Ivy, did they seem unable to comprehend it? Dad recovered first, his eyes brimming with relief, saying, "This child has finally grown sensible. Our love for you wasn't in vain. Rose, you're now willing to accept your sister, and that's a good thing. Live well together, and even as we age, we'll feel at ease." "At ease?" "Dad, Mom, you've been deceived by Ivy's hypocritical facade for too many years. Do you truly believe she'll manage my everything well?" My head spun again, my nose itched, and upon touching it, I discovered it was a nosebleed. Rose, why are you having a nosebleed? The weather hasn't been dry lately, Mom asked then. My hand paused while wiping the blood, unable to hold back. I looked at them and asked, Dad, Mom, if I really died of illness one day, would you regret it? But Mom's expression didn't shift. She merely glanced at me with a smile, saying, your complexion looks so healthy, how could you possibly die of illness? Stop saying such unlucky things. Yes, Ivy's different, she'll need proper nourishment once she recovers. Dad spoke while looking at Ivy with concern, and Lily quickly added, I think so too. Mommy's pretty healthy, godmother's the one we're most worried about. The last trace of hope in my heart vanished completely. I had nothing left to look forward to. I looked down at Lily, smiling as I said, Lily, haven't you always wanted your godmother to be your real mommy? I agree, Ivy is your mommy now, won't you call her mommy? A spark of joy flashed in Lily's eyes. Really? I smiled faintly. Once you call her mommy, you can always eat her cooking and have her by your side forever. This has been your wish all along, aren't you happy? Lily jumped up excitedly. Great. Mommy's the best in the world. Thank you, Mommy. With that, she let go of my hand and hugged Ivy. My parents and Victor watched the scene with satisfaction, while I turned to leave, casting them one final glance. My parents were playing with Lily alongside Ivy, and Victor watched with a smile. No one noticed me as I closed the ward door and left the hospital. With only one day left until my death, I had nowhere to go. My life had been busy and rushed, never once pausing to enjoy myself. I booked a ticket to City B, visited the sea at night, and intended to climb a mountain, but I could no longer hold on. Just before fainting, I dialed a number I hadn't called in nearly 5 years, then blacked out completely. When I awoke again, I was in a hospital, glancing at the time with a turn of my eyes. Only 6 hours remained until my death. Beside me was my childhood friend Jessie, her eyes red. Years ago, she had vehemently opposed my relationship with Victor, insisting he wasn't worth entrusting my life to, but I didn't listen. We had a huge fight, and she didn't even attend my wedding. I knew I shouldn't disturb her now, but apart from her, there was truly no one else in this world I could turn to. What's wrong with you? Weren't you so proud after marrying Victor? Jessie asked, her voice choked. Wasn't it a happy family of 3? How did it come to this? Why did the doctor say your organs are failing? Jessie's voice trembled. Wearing a ventilator, I smiled at her, recalling how, as children, we had promised that if one of us reached the end of life, the other would handle everything afterward, no matter what. Unable to speak, I struggled to lift my hand and point to my bag. Jessie retrieved several agreements from it, examined them briefly, nodded slightly, and placed them in her own bag. Thankfully, our unspoken understanding remained intact, allowing her to grasp my every intention without words. With only 3 hours left until my death, I declined resuscitation. After another bout of unconsciousness, I awoke to Jessie showing me a message on her phone from Ivy. Rose, I've won. Everything of yours is mine now. You think you can compete with me? Blame yourself for being incapable. Who told you your parents like me so much? Just leave the Ning family quietly. I'll take good care of your parents, husband, and daughter for you. After reading it, Jessie cried and cursed furiously in the ward. I sighed in self-mockery, reflecting that in my entire life, I had no regrets except for persuading Dad to sponsor Ivy. I first saw Ivy in a rundown orphanage, where I was volunteering with my teacher. It was snowing heavily that day, and all the children were huddled inside for warmth, except Ivy, who was scavenging leftover bones from a trash bin in the backyard. I couldn't bear it and begged Dad to sponsor her. After that, Ivy and I became inseparable friends. The following year, she joined my class, quickly winning the favor of teachers and classmates with her excellence, and I felt proud whenever someone praised her. But later, things took a strange turn. My friends inexplicably distanced themselves from me, treating Ivy as their best friend. Boys who liked me grew cold and began openly confessing to Ivy. Even my parents frequently urged me to bring Ivy home for meals and sleepovers, eventually giving her part of my room as her own. Perhaps I was too naive and insensitive back then, never imagining that Ivy's greatest skill was seizing everything that belonged to me amid others' praise. By the time I realized it, my room, my family, everything I had was taken by Ivy. I once asked Ivy why, but her response chilled me to the bone. "Rose, did you think I'd be grateful for your help? How could I possibly thank you? I can't stand your smug attitude in front of me. I'll take everything from you, just to see the despair on your face when I do." I once believed I could drive Ivy away and make my parents, Victor, and even Lily see her true colors, but I was too naive. I underestimated Ivy's cunning and overlooked how much my parents, Victor, and Lily favored her. I lost utterly and completely. With only 9 minutes until my death, my consciousness began to fade, my vision blurred, yet I still saw a message from Mom on Jesse's phone. "Rose, get someone to paint the walls of your house pink in the next few days. Your sister likes pink. Also, your sister will be discharged in half a month. When she is, move some of your stuff out. Ivy needs space for hers." Even in my final moments, Mom was still focused on Ivy. It seemed I truly didn't matter to her. So be it. Jesse seemed to be crying and shouting something by my ear, but I could no longer hear. After years of struggle, I was utterly exhausted. Finally, I could rest. On November 24th, Rose passed away in a hospital in City B, aged only 29. Ivy was watching TV in her hospital bed when the door suddenly opened. Looking up, she saw a man enter. Her biological father, Noah. "What are you doing here?" she asked, a flicker of disgust in her eyes, tinged with fear. Noah sneered. "What, if I hadn't dumped you at that orphanage, would you have met such a rich family? I'm out of money. Transfer me 100,000. Ivy sat up abruptly, glaring at Noah. "Why should I? Have you ever supported me for even a day since I was born?" Noah lounged on the ward's sofa, retorting, "Cut the crap, Ivy. I know all about your dirty deeds. Transfer the money obediently, and we won't fall out otherwise. You know what I'm capable of." Ivy clenched her fists tightly, loosening them after a long pause. "Fine, give me some time. I need to be discharged to make money." Noah scoffed. "You don't have the fate of a princess but caught a princess's disease, just early-stage cancer, yet wasting so much money. I'll give you 2 days. If I don't see the money by then, I'll go to your Ning family godfather." Noah stood, kicked open the ward door, and left. Ivy violently smashed a glass cup by the bedside table, panting heavily, her eyes filled with intense hatred. Why could everyone else have such happy lives, while she was destined to be abandoned in an orphanage by a beastly father and live a life of contempt? She had worked so hard to usurp Rose's place and drive the Ning family's eldest daughter out. She absolutely refused to return to that hand-to-mouth existence. Ivy got up from the bed. After deceiving Rose to secure the chemotherapy chance, her recovery accelerated daily, and she'd be discharged soon. But now, she only wanted to swiftly sell off the assets, shop business, and company she'd taken from Rose, transfer the money abroad in batches, and then leave the country under some pretext. Then neither her beastly father nor the gullible Ning family would ever find her. Yes, she had to act quickly. She told the nurse at the desk she was stepping out for a walk, then took a taxi downstairs to the bank. Upon arrival, Ivy handed her card to the teller, her heart trembling with excitement. Soon, Rose's money would be hers, and she'd be free. But then the teller looked up, giving her an odd glance. "Ma'am, the name and identity on this card don't match yours. Did you perhaps take the wrong card?" Ivy froze. "How's that possible? When we handled the procedures earlier, my family already transferred this card to me. Could you have made a mistake?" The teller shook their head. "Ma'am, this card still belongs to Ms. Rose, and it has been placed under a property protection freeze at our bank." Ivy was dumbfounded. Property protection freeze? How could that be? She had watched Rose sign the transfer agreement, checking it repeatedly before confirming. Had Rose pulled some trick afterward? Right, the shop and company too. Ivy left the bank, called a friend she knew, and sat anxiously on a bench outside. Minutes later, her friend called back. "Ivy, the shops and company you mentioned still belong to someone named Rose," her friend said. 2 days ago, a lawyer acting on behalf of this Rose applied for an ownership protection order. Boom! Ivy's mind exploded with shock. Ivy's face darkened as she opened her phone to contact Rose, but for some reason, though the call went through, Rose didn't answer and eventually, it went straight to voicemail. "Bitch, bitch." Ivy screamed uncontrollably by the roadside. She had thought Rose was an easy target, never expecting her to outmaneuver her at this critical moment. What now? If she couldn't produce the money, all her past deeds would be exposed. Right there were still the Ning family parents and Victor. Calming herself slightly, she took a taxi back to her hospital ward. 10 minutes later, the Ning family parents and Victor pushed open the ward door. Ivy, pretending nothing was amiss, greeted them with a smile. "Mom, Dad, Victor, you're here?" Elaine, as usual, exchanged pleasantries before scanning the ward and frowning. Rose isn't here?" Ivy's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly raised her brows and smiled. "No, Mom. Rose handed the company and shop business to me. Maybe she's relaxing and went out to have fun?" Charles sighed. "This child, why is she still so willful like before? I asked her to come back and help arrange for someone to repaint the house walls, such a small task, yet she's making excuses. I'll call her." He took out his phone, but soon, the cold sound of a powered-off line echoed in his ear. "It's off?" Charles frowned. "Looks like she really went out to have fun." "What's wrong with Rose? Asking her to help Ivy with something is like climbing a mountain. Don't know what she's upset about now." Elaine indignantly took out her phone to message Rose. Ivy watched from the side, a slight smirk curling one corner of her mouth. "See, Rose, this is the outcome I wanted. Even if you hate me to death, I'll still thrive. So what if your assets and business aren't in my name? Your parents and husband will still provide me with endless money." Charles and Elaine gave Ivy a few instructions and inquired about her health before leaving, but for some reason, Ivy felt that this time, their attitude toward her seemed to have shifted. Exhausted after work, Victor returned home and rested on the sofa with his eyes closed for a while, calling out, "Rose? Get me a glass of hot water." Only silence answered. Sitting up, he realized Rose hadn't been home for 3 straight days. Victor took out his phone to call Rose, but it was off. Messages went unanswered. Frowning, he involuntarily scrolled through their past chats. Most were Rose's messages, filling the screen with white text boxes, while his replies were sparse, dominated by simple responses. Victor's heart tightened. Over the years, he seemed to have truly neglected Rose a lot. He met her just after university graduation, alongside Ivy. If he were to describe their personalities, Rose was the epitome of calm, unfazed by anything, yet meticulous in her work. Ivy, however, was different, innocent, carefree, and lively, with an extraordinarily cheerful disposition. Whenever he met Rose for a date, Ivy would coincidentally appear, her considerate and friendly actions perfectly measured, causing Victor to pause momentarily. But did he truly like Ivy? Not really. Rose rarely praised him, while Ivy never held back her sweet compliments. He had merely been momentarily captivated by her flattery, but he knew Rose was the one who genuinely cared for him. He saw Ivy as a sister. Since they were all family, it wouldn't do to make things too ugly. Yet Rose seemed to target Ivy like a madwoman, though she hadn't been like that before. Now, she'd vanished somewhere. Victor sighed, checking his messages. Still no reply. Rose never used to take so long to respond. Perhaps she was truly angry with him. Victor put down his phone and went to the bathroom to freshen up. She must have gone out to clear her mind and would likely return in a few days. Elaine leaned against the bed, her gaze vacant. Charles called her several times before she snapped out of it. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Waking as if from a dream, Elaine replied, "Have you called Rose? Is her phone on?" Charles paused, looking at Elaine. "No, it's been off for 2 days now." "Strange, she's never done this before." Elaine's hand curled slightly for a moment. That day, after Rose handed the transfer documents to Ivy to sign and brought Lily to Ivy's side, she left. Elaine didn't even notice when she departed, and by the time she realized, Rose was long gone. Rose had never been like this before. Even at her most rebellious, she wouldn't stay out all night. Could she have encountered some danger? Elaine sat up, looking at Charles. "How long has Rose been gone?" Charles frowned. "About 4 days, I'd say." Elaine's heart sank, an inexplicable panic rising within her for reasons she couldn't pinpoint. The next morning, Elaine went to Ivy's ward, asking as soon as she opened the door, "Has Rose been here?" Ivy was momentarily taken aback, replying, "No, Mom, maybe Rose went out to have fun?" Elaine shook her head. Rose had always been obedient and would never go out to have fun without telling the family. As she turned to leave, Ivy stopped her. "Mom, Ivy smiled shyly. "Lately, I've been managing Rose's shop business." Her company might need some cash flow soon, around 3 million or so. I was wondering if Mom could don't touch anything yet, wait for Rose to come back and let her teach you. Elaine interrupted, turning to leave, leaving Ivy stunned in place. After Elaine left, Ivy bit her finger, her unease growing. She wasn't mistaken, Elaine's attitude toward her was indeed less warm than before, but why? She hadn't revealed any flaws. Where had things gone wrong? Meanwhile, Lily returned home from boarding school, opening the door and instinctively looking for Rose first, but the house was empty. Holding her test paper, Lily stood dazed in the house for a moment before retreating to her small room to do homework. She had scored first place this time, and in the past, her mom was always thrilled whenever she did well. She'd wait for Mom to come back. But even until night, neither Mom nor Dad returned. It wasn't until the next morning, after waking up, that Lily went to the living room and found Victor had returned at some point, sitting on the sofa, frowning at his phone, unmoving. "Dad? Has Mommy come back?" Victor looked up at a sleepy-eyed Lily holding her test paper. "I got first place again. I need Mommy to sign it." "Oh, and I've been craving Mommy's baked pancakes lately. Mommy's pancakes are better than Ivy Mommy's." Victor froze, his unease intensifying. Without a word, he stood and rushed to the Ning family home. Something was wrong, very wrong. Rose must be in trouble. Victor sped to the Ning family home. As he stepped out of the car, he saw Charles and Elaine emerging from the house in a panic. "Dad, Mom," he called, stopping them, "do you have any news of Rose?" Elaine, equally frantic, her eyes red, replied, "No. She left the hospital a few days ago after handling the paperwork. We don't know when. At first, we thought she was out clearing her mind, but it's been 4 days and her phone's still off." "Victor, could something have happened to Rose?" "It's been 3 days. Can we still report her missing to the police?" Victor's mind was in turmoil, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Don't panic. I have a friend at the police station. We can check the surveillance footage to see where she went." The group hurriedly went to the police station. After explaining their purpose, Victor's friend began reviewing the footage. In the reception room, Victor waited with near-frantic anxiety, his hands clenched tightly, his panic and unease at their peak. It must be his imagination. Rose was surely just angry at him, upset about his marriage to Ivy. No matter, when she returned, he'd refuse outright and coax her gently, and she'd surely agree. Then the reception room door opened, and Victor's friend entered, flipping through documents. "Any news?" Victor stood, full of hope, while Charles and Elaine rose nervously beside him. "Victor, this Rose is your wife? She's been declared dead. How didn't you know?" Everyone froze in place. As if struck by lightning, Victor stood rooted to the spot, unable to move. "Declared dead?" He grabbed his friend. "Did you get it wrong?" "What do you mean, declared dead?" His friend blinked. "No mistake. Look, the documents are right here. Bro, your wife was declared dead 4 days ago in City B. Since her residency isn't there, it went through an extra process. And your wife had a proxy lawyer who handled the death declaration fully." "Dead?" Victor's legs gave out, and he sank to the floor. It took Charles a long while to process it. Rose's phone being off meant she was already dead. But why? Was she murdered? Elaine clutched Victor's friend. "Police notice. Was my daughter killed? Have they caught the murderer?" Victor's friend shook his head. "It's said to be cancer. Her proxy lawyer didn't say much, only that they'd notify her family in a few days, but then you showed up." "Cancer?" A thunderous realization struck Elaine's mind. Cancer. She suddenly recalled that on the day Rose disappeared, she had smiled faintly and asked, "If I died of illness, would you miss me?" Ah, so her daughter was already ill then? But why hadn't she noticed? What had she said that day? "Your complexion looks so good. How could you die of illness? Stop saying such unlucky things." Elaine sank to the floor, a wave of despair slowly engulfing her heart. Yet she shed no tears, sitting dazed on the floor, her eyes utterly vacant. After a while, she stood and addressed the officer calmly. "Can you find that proxy lawyer? I want to locate them." "We don't know that, but the lawyer mentioned they'd contact you in about 3 days." Elaine was devastated. Charles no better. After Victor mustered the strength to drive the elders home, he sat alone in his car, staring blankly at the steering wheel, belatedly noticing his hands still trembling. He still couldn't accept the news. How could a woman as wonderful as Rose die of cancer? Cancer has symptoms, yet Rose showed none. Wait, he recalled how, days ago, Rose had inexplicably had a nosebleed and fainted. Victor had thought she was pretending or using a ploy to stop him from tending to Ivy. Turns out, it was cancer. Victor slammed the steering wheel hard, wishing he could shoot himself. Why? Why did it take until now to notice something was off with Rose? Cancer, one that kills so quickly, must be late stage. Why hadn't he noticed? Victor covered his face as memories flooded back. He recalled that half a month ago, Rose had mentioned needing that costly chemotherapy chance to treat her cancer. But Victor and the Ning parents thought Rose was faking it, buying out the chemotherapy opportunity for Ivy at a high price, meaning Rose's life had already entered a countdown then, Victor's teeth chattering with the realization. No wonder she gave everything to Ivy. It wasn't about being sensible. She knew she was dying and had no need for those things anymore. Ah! Victor roared, tears streaming down his face. 3 days passed in a haze. Victor stayed home drinking, while Lily, scared, didn't dare approach. Though just a child, she vaguely understood something had happened at home, and it involved her mom. But Lily refused to believe it. She hadn't yet told her mom about her first-place score. She wanted to cry but couldn't shed tears, only staring blankly as Victor drowned himself in alcohol. As Victor downed his last glass, the phone rang. A stranger's number. He hung up and kept drinking, but it rang again. Victor paused, then answered. A woman's voice, icy cold, came through. Is this Mr. Victor, Rose's husband? I'm Jesse, Rose's proxy lawyer. Please bring your identification and all family members to the law firm. Rose left a will that requires everyone's presence to fulfill. Hearing Rose's name, Victor sobered up halfway instantly. A will? Victor couldn't waste time. He rushed to the bathroom to freshen up, notified Charles, Elaine, and the just-discharged Ivy, and they all hurried to the law firm. In her office, Jessie reviewed Rose's belongings one last time. In her final moments, Rose had given her a note with a single line, I prepared everything after I die, handle it all for me. On the back was an instruction to thoroughly investigate Ivy. Jessie glanced at the file beside her, stuffed with Ivy's records. She rubbed her reddened eyes, steadied her emotions, and opened the office door. Victor and the others waited outside, including Ivy, who supported Elaine and Charles. Jessie's eyes flashed with coldness as she gestured them in and opened Rose's will. Upon seeing Jessie, Elaine paused, then a spark lit her eyes. You're Rose's childhood friend? It's been so many years. You've grown so much. Victor blinked, looking at Jessie. No wonder she seemed familiar. She was Rose's childhood friend Jessie, the one who most opposed his pursuit of Rose, publicly stating he couldn't make her happy. A prophecy fulfilled, and now, Victor felt a pang of shame recalling it. But Jessie ignored Elaine's words, gazing at those before her. These people, step by step, had caused Rose's death. How could she not hate them? I am Jessie, Rose's lawyer. Rose passed away on November 24 at 8:12 p.m. due to organ failure from late-stage cancer. Before her death, she entrusted me with drafting 3 agreements, all of which take effect posthumously. After Jessie finished, Ivy stood frozen, her heart sinking heavily. Before she could react, Jessie's sharp, cold eyes turned to her. Rose's will states that the shop transfer agreement, company ownership delegation agreement, and property transfer agreement she signed were not of her own volition. She set a clause to retract these transfers within a valid period, all to be revoked after her death. Thus, these 3 agreements, intended to transfer assets to Ivy, are null and void. Ivy snapped her head up. Why? Her loud outburst startled the Ning parents and Victor, who turned to look at her. Realizing her lapse too late, Ivy forced down her anger, forcing a smile. I mean, these 3 agreements were specifically approved by Mom and Dad for Rose to transfer to me. Her declaring them invalid, isn't that a slap in their faces? Ivy's voice trailed off as she noticed Jessie smirking coldly at her. Jessie stepped forward, addressing those who claimed to be Rose's family. The client left a will instructing me to investigate all of Ivy's records. Over these 7 days, I uncovered many things. Ivy, this is why I had to delay for 7 days. Elaine looked up, puzzled. What things? Could Rose's death be related to Ivy? But didn't Rose die of cancer? Jessie shot Ivy a look of disgust before opening the prepared documents. These are all the records uncovered about Ivy. Feel free to take a look if you're interested. Ivy stood pale, unsure how to react. Charles glanced at her, took the documents from Jessie, and froze entirely upon reading them. Ivy had actually been in contact with her biological father since high school. Once he learned she'd been adopted by the Ning family, he began reaching out privately. All the money the Ning family gave Ivy over the years went to fill his holes. Even the funds Rose was forced to relinquish to Ivy ended up with Noah. Moreover, Ivy was highly calculating even as a child, deliberately appearing pitiful in front of influential visitors to the orphanage. She succeeded 3 times with this tactic, but each time was sent back, invariably because she exploited her innocent facade to commit repulsive acts. This was why all the orphanage children shunned her, yet it was this feigned innocence that deceived Rose out of everything, including her life. Charles slammed the documents to the floor, his eyes red with grief, rage, and despair. Ivy had exploited Rose's still-forming values and compassion from her student days, step by step, to take everything from her. And he had fallen for it, blindly allowing such a despicable person to drive their own daughter out, failing even to see her one last time before she died. Shameless! Pathetic! Charles roared in anguish, collapsing helplessly to the floor, sobbing like a child while clutching his head. Victor stared blankly at the will. No mention of him or Lily, only that all of Rose's assets were to be donated to charity unconditionally. It seemed Rose never forgave him from start to finish, but how desperate must she have been before dying to not even mention him or Lily? Ivy stood frozen, her body cold, heart pounding violently. It was exposed. All the secrets she'd tried to hide were uncovered. What now? What now? Ivy lunged forward, grabbing Elaine and Charles's pant legs, dropping to her knees with a thud. Mom, Dad, none of this is true. Rose framed me. Framed you? Victor's calm voice sounded behind her, sending a chill down Ivy's spine. She turned slowly, finding his gaze steady but his eyes icy cold. Framed you into signing to take all her assets? Framed you into seizing her only treatment chance, leaving her to die in agony? Ivy, Victor gritted his teeth, you killed Rose. Elaine wailed, seizing Ivy's neck, give me back my daughter's life. Give her back. The scene erupted into chaos as the group clashed in the office. It took effort to separate them, but what use was crying now? Rose was dead, gone with her final regrets. It took Elaine a long while to calm down. Wiping tears from her face, she stood and looked down at Ivy. As of today, the Ning family officially terminates Ivy's adoption proceedings. Simultaneously, we will sue to recover every cent of support paid to her over the years. I'll make you repay it all. It's my fault for bringing an ungrateful wretch into our home and causing my own daughter's death. I will hold you accountable. Ivy panicked. No. Don't do this to me. Godmother. Aunt Elaine. You've raised me for so long. Even if it's not the blood tie you had with Rose, after all this time, there's some affection, right? I didn't mean to take Rose's things. Rose had everything. Even a tiny bit slipping through her fingers was a fortune to me. Aunt Elaine, I beg you don't cancel the adoption. If you do, I'll die. I'll be forced to death by that beast of a father. Elaine flung Ivy's hand away, her expression frigid. The Ning family was deceived by you. My daughter can't come back now, but we won't keep you around. You've reconnected with your father anyway. Returning to your biological father is best for both sides. After speaking, Elaine pulled Charles out of the office, Victor close behind. Ivy lunged to grab him. Victor. Victor, don't go. Didn't you say you'd marry me? Let's do it now, okay? Lily likes me even with Rose gone. Lily must still like me, and I like you, Victor. I've liked you since the first moment I saw you. The Ning family doesn't want me, but you can't abandon me too. Victor turned, looking at the tear-streaked Ivy. I only noticed you initially because of Rose, but I've never had the slightest feelings for you. What right do you have to compare yourself to Lily's mother? He shook off her hand and left, leaving Ivy alone. But I wasn't the only one who killed Rose. You all did too, didn't you? Only a gust of wind answered her. Ivy sat shivering, while Jessie watched coldly, her eyes quietly reddening. Looking at the items in her hands, Pain spread through Jesse's heart. Rose, this gift you left for Ivy worked, can you see it from above? Time passed bit by bit, and before he knew it, 2 years had gone by. Returning home after work, Victor sat dazed on the sofa. Beside the living room coffee table was Rose's photo. He gazed quietly at her framed picture, where she smiled faintly, gentle and serene. Yet he felt as if he'd only possessed Rose in a past life. In this one, he'd never truly had her love, or perhaps he had, but didn't cherish it, taking it for granted. Victor closed his eyes. The pain of losing Rose might not have been immediate, but as time wore on, it piled up like snowflakes, eventually becoming an unbearable block of ice. By the time he noticed, he was trapped, struggling to breathe evenly. The door opened, then Lily was back, starting junior high this year. She had more homework. She glanced at Victor upon entering, then headed to her room to work. Wait. Victor sat up. A while back, your teacher called me, saying you're dating at school. Lily, this won't do. You're still a student. How can you be in a relationship? It's too early for you. But Lily shot him an impatient look. What's it to you? Do I need you to teach me? The person I like treats me well, not like how you treated Mom. If you want me to behave, fine. When Mom comes back, I will. Before Victor could get angry, Lily slammed her door shut. Victor clutched his head in pain. Rose, can you tell me how you used to raise Lily? Can you come back? These days without you are just too hard. Over these 2 years, Elaine and Charles were plagued by nightmares. Elaine sought Jesse, hoping to retrieve Rose's ashes, only to be told Rose had said before dying that she never wanted to see the Ning family again. Not even her ashes should return. Jesse, honoring her final words, scattered them into the sea. Elaine's mental state deteriorated rapidly, even descending into delusion, often thinking Rose was still at school and would return after classes. And Charles? Charles merely sat in Rose's room daily, staring at the things she left behind, doing nothing else. 2 more years passed. Lily was in high school now. Today was the parent-teacher meeting, attended by Victor, but most in the classroom were students' mothers, asking teachers about their children's studies. Victor, distracted, was on the phone with someone. Lily lowered her head. If Mom were still here, would she be like these other moms, asking the teacher about her studies, then gently encouraging her at home? That's how a mom should be, but where was her mom now? Lily fought back tears. Turning away, losing a loved one is a lifelong dampness. The weight of that phrase hit her deeply. After the meeting, Victor went to a lounge in an entertainment venue for a business deal. Having lost Rose, he could only work non-stop to numb himself, unable to find another way to cope with the pain. Exiting after the deal, he saw Ivy being berated by a manager. Bowing meekly with red slap marks on her face, he passed her without looking back. After the Ning family terminated Ivy's adoption, she was taken back by her biological father. Victor hadn't expected to encounter her here, but he had no intention of helping. This was Ivy's retribution for taking everything from Rose, a retribution she must endure, just as he and the Ning couple must endure the pain of losing Rose. Victor gave a bitter smile and left the venue.